Sure. Awesome. So I made a formal logic where I think it proves determinism, therefore disproves free will. But before I give the formal logic, I would like to go through three assertions to see if you guys agree with those assertions, and then I will mention my formal logic. Would that work?
Sure.
Yes, let's keep it a little bit expedient just so that we can make sure because we got quite a few callers on the line, but by all means, give us the quick spiel.
Yes. So I will mention the three assertions now. Is brain a physical matter? Do you guys agree with that?
That the brain is
Brain is,
physically yeah.
Yes.
yeah, the brain is made of physical matter. Yes.
Okay. Okay. The second point is, are all physical matters governed by the natural laws of the universe?
I would agree with that, my
Yeah.
understanding.
Okay. My last assertion would be, thoughts and desires are governed by the natural laws of the universe. That equals to determinism. Would you agree with the definition of my determinism?
I'm
To
not
my
sure.
understanding of determinism, and to be fair, most of my understanding of this comes from, Robert Sapolsky. He talks a little bit about free will and he had what you might enjoy called determined. That works. But again, my understanding is probably overly
Cam,
Okay.
are
I
you
will
listening to
mention.
the show at the same time?
Sorry, what was that?
Were you listening to the show at the same time? I'm hearing a bit of an echo on
I got
us.
a I got some feedback on that as
Oh,
well.
I think my finger was on the speaker on my phone. That's why it echoed. But
Okay.
is it good now?
Better now.
Awesome. Okay. I will just mention the last assertion again. For me, determinism means thoughts and desires are governed by the natural laws of of the universe. So it's not governed based on you; it's governed by the natural laws of the universe. And seems like you guys kind of agreed with it. Is that
I
correct?
mean, I agree with that as a conclusion. Like, I just happen to agree that that is a conclusion. I'm not sure you get there. Where I thought you were listing some presuppositions. Like, if this is a presupposition, it's a pretty heavy one. Were these meant to be the premises?
No, no, these are not
One
the
and
premises. I just want to agree on the definitions first before I go to
oh, on the
my.
definitions.
Yeah,
So determinism would be to me, yeah, that what happens is entirely determined by natural processes. For the sake of this conversation, I'm fine with that. Are you fine with that, Eric?
Yeah, that works.
okay, awesome. Now I will mention my two premise and then the conclusion. Premise number one, all physical matter, including the brain, is governed by the natural laws of the universe. Do you agree with the premise one?
I
Sure.
do, as far as I
I,
understand it.
I mean, we're going to agree to your conclusion, so we're not the most critical audience, but keep going.
And premise two, thoughts and desires are products of the brain.
Yes,
So,
insofar as I understand it, again, I would agree with that.
so I agree with that now, but 8 years ago, I
Okay.
would have violently disagreed with it. I would have just not accepted. I would have said, no, your thoughts and desires are absolutely driven by things in addition to your brain. So you're not
Something
going to
that's
get a theist to
external
just
there.
you're not going to get a theist to
Yeah.
just buy in on that one. Sorry.
Right, right. Because they believe that there's something external, like the consciousness,
Correct.
right? Right. Okay. So, giving these premises, we can conclude thoughts and desires are governed by the natural laws of the universe. And if you agreed with the definition of determinism that I mentioned on the third claim assertion, we can replace thoughts and desires or governed by the natural laws of the universe with determinism. So, this would prove determinism, therefore, this proves free will.
I mean, I feel like that's trivially true, only
Yeah.
in that it's trivially true in the same sense that if I have a dog that we agree is black and brown, that I have a black and brown dog. It's kind of like, well, these are number two is doing number two doesn't have a lot underneath it, right? Other than just finding a crowd that accepts it from you.
Right. And also,
So
there's scientifically, I think, accepted that our thoughts and desires are product of the brain. I
I
think
don't disagree.
there should be scientific.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't disagree, but you didn't bring that in, right? Like you didn't have a number of other premises that let someone walk down the path with you to get to your conclusion. Like, were you pitching this to see if perhaps you think this would be an effective tool to convince someone who doesn't believe in determinism to believe in determinism.
Yes, and also to prove that free will cannot exist. However, this formal logic, it seems to be valid because there's the connecting term, there's the major term, and then there's the minor term, and also sound because you agree with the premises, right? So it's a valid and
Well,
sound formal
no, I'm
logic.
telling you, it's only sound to someone who already agrees with your conclusion. Really, there's a bit
Right.
of question begging there
Um,
because you're attempting to answer whether everything is materially driven, and your premise is that everything is materially driven. Do you understand what begging the question? What I mean when I say that? And then, well, just so that's when you're begging the question is a phrase that they use when when part of the conclusion is in a premise, like when you smuggle it in. I feel like that's what you've done
yeah,
here.
there are some terms that are, yeah, it has to be in premise in order to prove the conclusion.
So, I mean, yes, I believe it's valid. I personally think it's sound, but I wouldn't have
Yeah.
used to, and I don't think you're gonna I don't think this is gonna be the tool to sway someone to get to join you. That's just
Right.
my 2 cents,
Yeah.
and
But
your mileage may vary.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
so
it might
if
be
it
useful
go ahead.
to include it might be useful to you to include I mean, I like to argue from examples and from data. That's kind of like my bread and butter, right? So to me, when you're having the free will conversation, when you're having like the dualism conversation, like this idea that somehow there's something that decides your wants and desires that is external to just the physical. I mean, you can bring up plenty of examples from neuroscience. The classic is like Phineas Gage, right? Where if the matter of the brain itself is influenced, is damaged, right, then that actually does impact things like the personality, the wants, the desires, things of that nature, which I
Mhm.
think would be a good way to, if you're struggling on that second point, potentially bring someone over to at least be more sympathetic to the perspective that you're trying to argue for.
And
Right.
Cam,
Makes sense.
I think your definitions also need to include free will because I just now realized that we didn't discuss what even you mean by free will. So
Uh,
if by
yeah.
free will if you mean just making choices, that's
Mhm.
one thing. If you mean could not have chosen otherwise, which is what I think is meaningful discussion of free will, those are two separate conversations. And I think you've maybe solved the soft version that, like, yeah, making choices, not a big deal. Coin
Right.
sorting
So
machines make choices, but the hard question is, could we have chosen otherwise given identical circumstance? I don't know which of those you hold, or maybe some other third alternative, but you might want to clarify that up as well.
yeah. So I could have added the fourth claim, the fourth assertion, which says determinism is opposite of free will. Would you agree with that? Hard determinism is opposite of free will. If you agree with that,
It's
then
hard. It's hard to say that words are opposite, right? Like that is closed the opposite of open? Not always. Like so, I wouldn't. I would more phrase it about what it is as opposed to saying what it isn't.
yeah, based on
So,
my understanding, is free will is opposite of determinism. But
but what is
I
free
understand
will?
they're different. It's you making your actions based on your desires. Like you have
But
your own desires. That
you can't argue that people aren't taking actions based on desires. They absolutely are. Even if determinism's true, people are taking actions based on their desire.
true, true, true. But I think most people, I think when we talk about free will versus determinism, when we talk about free will, most people think that free will is you, that you have a choice in this universe to make an action. Isn't that the
Well, not
general understanding of free will?
no. Well, I mean, it is a common parlance, but when you get deep into the philosophy, that's why they want to talk about could not have done otherwise, because that's the question. Question is, if I'm standing in front of an ice cream, there's chocolate and strawberry ice cream. I'm standing there, and you know, the moment passes, and I choose chocolate. If the
Mhm.
question is there any scenario in that exact moment where the temperature of the room is the same? All my previous priors, the fact that my dog is nipping at my heel, like, oh, if all those circumstances are identical, would I have ever chosen strawberry in that moment? That's the interesting question. Not is there someone inside of me who decided that chocolate was better than strawberry in that particular moment? Like, that's not even the interesting question, at least as far as
I
I'm concerned.
I think I understand free will as sort of as in opposition to this idea that if we are the result of what we are physically, of what we are materially, right? Free will would be the proposal that there is something about us that is divorced from our physicality, from the chemistry that
Mm,
makes up our brain, and the chemistry that makes up our body, and our genetics, and the history that has led us to any given exact moment that allows us to choose something that might go against what everything prior predisposed us to choosing. Right. So free will would be something that can kind of give us that choice against whatever we might be leaning towards otherwise. And I think to do that, you almost have to establish that there even can be something separate from just the physical, which I think you did a good job saying in your premises, but you have to support that, I think. Because it again, as kind of Paul said, whoever you're having this argument with is probably not going to go down without screaming on each one of these premises, right? So you have to be ready with data with support for it. And again, I
Right.
haven't read it because I've only read his other stuff, but Sapolsky has an excellent book called Determined that is specifically on the neurobiology behind this exact concept. Like when we make a choice, do we understand the choice we're making consciously first, or do our muscles move to make the decision first? You see what I'm saying? Does our eye twitch in the direction of chocolate as opposed to strawberry before we even realize it? And there's quite a bit of neuroscience behind this that, to my understanding, supports the notion that there isn't this separate entity to us that bestows free will upon us. At least, like we're extremely complicated stimulus response machines, which I find to be a very romantic prospect, but some people find reductive, I guess. But you're going to have to establish these premises as you move along. I think with decent data, in order to get someone at least on the same page with you theoretically.
Right. That makes sense. And I totally agree how you clarified free will or give a definition that there must be something external that most people think we have that basically goes against or escapes the natural laws in order to make that decision, which I thought that's what free will is. But yeah, I also read a research on that it says your desires, like the first thing that comes to your thought is already in your unconscious mind, and then it gets transferred to your conscious mind, and then you think about it. So it already seems to be like
Yeah.
it happened, but you just realize that it happened. Yeah, if you go through each premise, I think based on the current scientific understanding, it basically proves determinism. But yeah, I have to like dig into each premise and then mention scientific research and so on to
I I
prove
think
my
I
point.
think what you're going to run into as well, and at least this has been my experience with, once you kind of brute force somebody to see the point from your perspective by using data, what they're going to appeal to is like, well, maybe free will is something that is just not quantifiable yet. So I feel like you need to be kind of
Mhm.
ready. Like, okay, well, that's fine. If you want to appeal to something miraculous that we have no support for, be my guest. But then it's no longer supported by the empirical. And I think that with that in mind, you need to make it clear from the outset what you're going for. If you're going to include sort of metaphysical aspects and options for whoever it is that you're arguing with, or if you're just making the case that, from a scientific perspective, big S scientific perspective, there's no support for free will. So I think setting
Right,
those
right.
expectations you're going into it is always helpful.
Exactly. And if you think there is free will, that means you're thinking that there's something external that's happening outside of the chemical reactions in your brain, which there's no evidence for it. So I don't see how it can happen. Anyway, I thought it's interesting and I tried my best to keep it simple and try to keep it valid and sound.
No,
But yeah,
I think what you're working with so far is awesome. I mean, you've clearly given a lot of thought to it. You've clearly got it laid out in a way that, at least with Paul and I, right? Like we understand what you're saying, but as Paul said, we're kind of playing this on easy mode because we already agree with your conclusion. You know, Start a fight about this on
right,
Twitter.
right.
You'll figure out really quickly where the weaknesses in your argument or how you're explaining it might be. The best way is to always test it on people who are going to disagree.
Right, right. I agree. Yeah, I posted this on Twitter. I just made the account like a few weeks ago, so not many
Stay
people saw it, but yeah.
Stay away.
stay away from it. It's my
Also,
do as I say, not as I do.
yeah, I see there are lots of fights, especially on atheism and theism. It's interesting to see these. But anyway, I had one more thing to talk about. Is there time for me or
Yes, briefly, we'll try to hit it quick, but yes, go ahead.
right? Okay. Have you guys heard of black pill? I know you have heard of red pill, but what about the black pill?
My understanding of the black pill is that it's always like a more doomer perspective, whatever the red pill was, right? So if the red pill is like, here's how you look next to get the woman of your dreams, then black pilling is like,
Right.
give up. You'll never get what you want. I like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but, you know, coding these and like taking the red pill or the black pill, like, I mean, it's just a sexy, you know, memeified way to try to push whatever it is that you're trying to get people to be sympathetic towards ultimately.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say the ideology that comes with black pill, it aligns with the statistics and scientific evidences and also evolutionary biology. I was just wondering, would you guys agree with black pill or is this something that I'm sure you guys have heard of insults, but I know most people don't understand what insults are. I, I think there's a misinterpretation of what they're claiming. But if you actually look at their claims and then look at the research behind the claims, it kind of makes sense how your self is biologically determined based on your genetics. Therefore, your value is determined by your genetics. And therefore, you have like a lower chance or a higher chance to reproduce. I think it makes sense, but I don't know what you guys think about it.
So I have an opinion. Well, I've dominated the
Please.
past couple of minutes. So if you want to
No,
go, you
please.
can.
I am absolutely not going to talk about incels.
I'll offer my perspective. I'm quite optimistic. You know, I
Right.
have seen people of every single walk of life find an individual, a significant other that seems to be just perfectly suited for them. I think that it's incredibly reductionist to reduce people to, you know, these genetic or personality elements that they choose to score based off of what they see in the media. Because I don't think the media is an accurate, or like even dating apps are like an accurate representation of what most folks are actually looking for out there, which is people want to feel seen, they want to be connected, they want to be desired, right? These are all pretty simple
Yeah.
human wants on like the Maslow's hierarchy, right? And I've seen people who you would be surprised to be as successful as they are as far as finding romantic or sexual connection be incredibly successful, and I've seen people who you would suppose should be very successful be not very successful. So I think that it's oversimplifying the situation. The black pill simplifies it in a way that makes it palatable for people who are currently in, you know, not having success in whatever it is that they're trying to find, be it again romantic sexual connection, but to make them feel better
Uh-huh.
about where you're at, right? It's like, oh, well, there's a reason why you're not being successful. I refuse to believe that. Again, I think that you can, if you really want to try to quantify everything, I'm sure there's a way to probabilistically reduce people if you want. But at the end of the day, there's not a soul out there that is incapable of finding a significant other, somebody who they can connect, in my opinion. But
Right.
again, I take the optimistic approach on that.
Yes, yes. And I would say it's mostly based on probability. It's not like zero or one. You're born with this genetic, therefore it's done for you. But I would say it's based on probability. If you're born with this genetic, you're most likely going to find. If you're born with this, you're not most likely going to find it. But based
Mm,
on the online dating statistics that I see, and based on the experiments, there have been many experiments too on videos, YouTube. You can see how behavior of people changes based on the person that they're talking to, if they're attractive or not attractive. And it all makes sense from evolutionary point of view. And if you put this with the idea of the determinism, it just seems like, okay, if you don't have free will, it's already determined. Basically, it seems like you're basically doomed. But there might
And
be
so
some,
So all
you
I
go ahead.
will add to that is if you
yeah,
I'm learning the phrase black pill for the first time, and that's fine. But if you want,
yeah,
there is something a part of attractiveness for a lot of people is a positive outlook. And if you are wanting to, if if in life you want to be a pessimist, you can find data. As someone who's the most pessimistic person I know, I can find data to support reasons to be pessimistic about you name the topic, and I can be pessimistic about it. But going into especially something like becoming friends with people or having interactions, carrying with you a defeated attitude before you start is going to lower the chances of whatever it is you're going to do. So I'm not saying yet there was necessarily going to be success, but certainly no one's helping themselves by coming into it defeated. That's all I will say. So
Yeah.
in terms of game theory, black pill sounds like a bad strategy.
Right.
Just
It's not
add
a
to
thing
that
to you.
too.
Yep.
I think I'll add to that too. It's sort of like my last thought on it as well is that you have to be careful when you're taking things from an evolutionary perspective, like kind of imposing eve of psych on human behavior, because the world that we live in today is about as far from, quote unquote natural as you can get. I mean, we are exposed to stimuli in a way that is just unprecedented as compared to before. And I think it leads to a lot of pessimistic attitudes in a way that again is relatively unprecedented. So I think that calling it a sort of evolutionary destiny almost gives it too much credit. I,
Mhm.
I think I think it's better to take it case by case personally. I don't think the black pill is well supported evolutionarily speaking, but that's just my opinion.
I had one more thing I forgot. I just forgot what to say.
Tell you what,
Yeah,
Cam,
I forgot. I was gonna reply
mull it
something to that, but I totally forgot. Thanks to
Mull
the
mull it
determinism.
over mull it over, and next time Skep Talk's going on, come back in guns blazing. Because unfortunately, we have some other
Absolutely.
calls on the line. So
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry to
I
kinda
just remembered. Yes.
out.
Yeah, I will just tell this and then leave. But I just remember what I was gonna say. My problem is that when people say, "Oh, personality is everything. Looks is not important." That's my problem, which goes against what the research shows. It shows looks are way, way more important than personality. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for talking to me. And yeah,
Thank you so much, Cam. Catch you later.
thank you. Bye bye.
And alright. Interesting. I'm of course, now I have a thought on it after we've already dropped Cam, but, like, I think that when you think of, like, the appearance versus personality, right? Appearance is oftentimes what kind of pulls people in for, like, initial attraction, and I think attraction is important in any relationship, but personality is what keeps people staying. Connection is what keeps people sticking around. Folks don't tend to nurture relationships that are exclusively based off of, like, physical or sexual attraction because those that kind of stuff does fade over time in all of us as we age. So, I mean, I'm eternally an optimist though. So, that's my thought. Now that Paul's been educated on the black pill, how do you feel
Yeah.
about it? Your black pill perspective.
Uh, well, I'm not. I also feel like even so. Let's grant absolutely there is some level of attraction, physical attraction involved with meat selection. 'Cause that would be weird to and it didn't in any way. Again, I'm more of a if where you want to go with this is game theory, any individual who is looking for I don't care if it's a job or a friend or a mate or anything, you need to figure out what your assets are and what your liabilities are and figure those out. I'm you know, I'm I was Shannon, and there's no reason for this person to
You're not black pill, Paul. You are not black pilled.
but yeah, I no, but there's there's as you say, there's somebody for everybody. I really yeah, no, I get it, but even if it was true, it's not I guess it's one of those ones where even if it was true, it's not helpful. And normally I'm advocating here, I don't even care if it's helpful, and that's like, tell me this true. But in this case, I mean, it's if you want it, if you'd like to use it as a reason to give up, I guess, suppose you just not achieving your goals.
Yeah. I get where you're coming from. I'm too bubbly for that. I'm too optimistic. I everybody out there. There's someone, as you said, there's someone for everyone. But I kind of like the way you took that, right? Like, let's assume for a moment it is true. All right, how's the doomer perspective helping you? Right? Like,
Right.
who are you actually going to? Let's say your chances are 50% lower than someone else's, and I don't buy that. But let's say that they were, and it's like
Correct.
being a bummer is not going to help you out. It's just not. People pick up on outlook. They do, and they pick up on things like ambition and drive and optimism and whatever.